What if I told you that some of the laws from ancient civilizations were so peculiar, they'd make even the strangest modern rules seem ordinary? Imagine living in a world where your clothing color, your dinner menu, or even the number of guests at your funeral could land you in trouble. That's the reality our ancestors faced, governed by legal systems that were as fascinating as they were bizarre. Today, we're uncovering 19 of the most peculiar laws from the ancient world, rules that reveal the quirks, priorities, and even the fears of societies long gone. From the rigid codes of Hammurabi to the curious decrees of ancient Rome, these laws aren't just relics of the past, they're windows into how humanity has always navigated order, morality, and survival. So, buckle up as we dive into the mysterious ancient world where the laws might seem strange, but the stories behind them are even stranger. Let's begin. The Code of Hammurabi stands as one of humanity's earliest attempts to bring order and justice to a chaotic world. Carved into a towering stone stele nearly 4,000 years ago, this legal system wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing, it was about maintaining balance. The principle of an eye for an eye might sound brutal to us today, but in its time it was revolutionary. It meant that punishments had to fit the crime, preventing excessive retaliation. Yet the code wasn't just about fairness, it was about consequences. Take, for example, the law concerning builders. If a house collapsed and killed the owner, the builder could face execution. This wasn't just about punishment, it was about ensuring that those with specialized skills took their responsibilities seriously. After all, in a society where survival often depended on the quality of craftsmanship, mistakes carried life or death stakes. But the Code of Hammurabi didn't stop there. Surgeons, too, were held to an incredibly high standard. If a patient died during surgery, the surgeon's hands could be severed. While this might seem extreme, it highlights how much trust was placed in those with medical knowledge, and how devastating it was when that trust was broken. These laws weren't just about enforcing rules, they were about protecting a society where every role was vital to the community's survival. Babylonian culture valued accountability above all else, and the Code of Hammurabi reflected that. It's a stark reminder of how ancient civilizations grappled with questions of justice, responsibility, and the fragility of life. What would it have been like to live under such a system? The answer lies in the details of these peculiar laws, which reveal as much about humanity's early struggles as they do about our enduring search for order. In ancient Egypt, the Nile River wasn't just a body of water. It was the heartbeat of an entire civilization. Every year, its predictable floods brought life to the barren desert, turning the land into a fertile oasis. But with such a precious resource came strict regulations. One of the most intriguing laws of the time was the prohibition against diverting water from the Nile without official permission. If you were caught redirecting its waters for your own fields or personal use, you could face hefty fines or worse, exile from the community. Imagine the stakes in a society where survival hinged on the Nile's generosity. Stealing its waters wasn't just a crime, it was a threat to the collective well-being. This law wasn't just about punishment, it was about ensuring fairness in a world where water was the ultimate equalizer. The annual flooding of the Nile was a gift, but it was also a responsibility. Everyone had to share in its bounty, and no one could hoard it for themselves. But here's where things get interesting. Who decided who had access to the water? The law raises questions about power and privilege. Were the wealthy and influential given preferential treatment, or did the system aim to protect the most vulnerable? While we don't have all the answers, what's clear is that this law reflects the delicate balance ancient Egyptians had to strike between individual ambition and communal survival. Water management in ancient Egypt wasn't just practical, it was sacred. The Nile was seen as a divine gift, and tampering with its flow was almost like offending the gods themselves. This blend of practicality and spirituality shaped their legal system, making it a fascinating mix of earthly and heavenly concerns. It's a reminder that even thousands of years ago, societies were grappling with questions we still face today. How do we share limited resources? Who gets to decide? And how do we ensure fairness in an unequal world? As we journey through these ancient laws, each one reveals not just the quirks of the past, but also the timeless struggles of humanity. Picture this: you're living in ancient Athens and you've just plucked a cabbage from a neighbor's garden. Seems harmless enough, right? Not according to the laws of Draco. In 7th century Athens, even the smallest infraction like stealing that cabbage could cost you your life. These laws, crafted by the lawmaker Draco, were so severe that his name became synonymous with harshness. To this day, we use the term draconian to describe rules that feel excessively strict or unforgiving. But what drove Draco to create such a merciless legal system? Some historians suggest that Athens at the time was a city in turmoil. With social unrest and frequent conflicts, the ruling class may have seen extreme punishments as the only way to restore order. By making the consequences of crime so dire, they hoped to deter wrongdoing altogether. Others argue that these laws weren't just about control, they were about sending a message. In a society where power was concentrated in the hands of a few, the death penalty for even minor offenses served as a stark reminder of who held authority. Yet, there's more to these laws than their brutality. They also reveal the complexities of governance in ancient Greece. Athens was a city-state experimenting with democracy, but it was also a place where inequality and instability were rampant. The Draconian laws, while extreme, were an attempt to navigate these challenges. They may not have been fair, but they were effective at least for a time. Over the years, the Athenians would come to see the flaws in Draco's system, eventually softening many of his harshest decrees. What's fascinating is how these laws reflect a universal tension, the struggle to balance justice with mercy, order with fairness. While Draco's approach might seem shocking today, it forces us to ask ourselves, how far would we go to maintain stability, and at what cost? As we leave ancient Athens behind, we'll see how other civilizations approach this delicate balance, sometimes with compassion, other times with severity. Each system tells a story not just of laws, but of the values and challenges that shaped them. In ancient Rome, the concept of family wasn't just about love or kinship, it was about power. At the center of every household stood the Paterfamilias, the male head of the family, who wielded near total authority over his relatives. This wasn't merely a title, it was a position of immense control. The Paterfamilias had the legal right to make decisions that would seem unthinkable today, including selling his children into slavery or, in extreme cases, ordering their execution for disobedience. To modern eyes, this might appear barbaric, but in Roman society, it was a cornerstone of order and stability. The law of Paterfamilias wasn't just about dominance, it was deeply tied to the Roman belief in hierarchy and duty. The family was seen as a microcosm of the state, with the Paterfamilias acting as its ruler. His authority was absolute, but it also came with responsibilities. He was expected to protect and provide for his family, ensuring its survival and prosperity. In this way, the law wasn't just about control, it was about maintaining the social fabric that held Roman society together. Yet, this system raises profound questions about the balance of power. What happened when a paterfamilias abused his authority? Could there be any recourse for those under his rule? The answer, for the most part, was no. Roman law placed immense trust in the head of the household, assuming he would act in the best interests of his family. But as with any system of unchecked power, abuses were inevitable. Stories of cruel or tyrannical fathers were not uncommon, and they highlight the darker side of this legal framework. Interestingly, the law of Paterfamilias also reflects the values of a society in flux. As Rome expanded and evolved, so too did its ideas about family and individual rights. Over time, some of the harshest aspects of the law were softened, particularly as the influence of Christianity grew and brought new ideas about compassion and equality. This gradual shift reminds us that even the most entrenched systems can change, shaped by the values and pressures of their time. What can we learn from this ancient system? On one hand, it shows us how deeply cultural beliefs can shape laws, and how those laws in turn shape people's lives. On the other, it forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, authority, and the vulnerability of those who lack it. The law of Paterfamilias may belong to a distant past, but the questions it raises about family, control, and individual rights are as relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. As we move forward, we'll see how other societies grappled with similar challenges, each offering its own unique perspective on the delicate balance between order and freedom. The Persian Empire was a marvel of its time, stretching across 3 continents and connecting diverse peoples under a single rule. At the heart of this vast domain was an intricate web of royal roads, stretching over thousands of miles and binding the empire together. These roads weren't just dirt paths, they were lifelines essential for trade, communication, and the swift movement of armies. But here's where things take a surprising turn. One of the empire's most peculiar laws made it a capital offense to obstruct these roads. Imagine the stakes. Tampering with a road wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a crime punishable by death. At first glance, this law might seem extreme. Why would a blockage on a road warrant such a harsh punishment? But when you consider the sheer scale of the Persian Empire, the logic becomes clear. These roads were the empire's nervous system, carrying messages, goods, and soldiers across vast distances. A single obstruction could disrupt the flow of information, delay critical supplies, or even hinder the movement of troops needed to quell rebellions. In a world without instant communication, the roads were the only way to maintain control over such a sprawling territory. This law also speaks volumes about the priorities of Persian rulers. For them, infrastructure wasn't just about convenience, it was about survival. The royal roads symbolized the empire's unity and strength, and any threat to them was seen as a threat to the empire itself. By enforcing such a severe penalty, the rulers sent a clear message. The roads were sacred, and their protection was non-negotiable. It's a fascinating glimpse into how ancient leaders balanced the practical needs of governance with the symbolic power of infrastructure. Yet, this law wasn't just about control, it was about vision. The Persian Empire was one of the first to recognize the importance of connectivity in holding together a diverse and far-flung realm. Their roads were engineering marvels, complete with way stations for travelers, wells for water, and even a primitive form of postal service. These innovations weren't just practical, they were revolutionary, setting a standard that future empires would strive to emulate. What can we learn from this ancient law? It reminds us that infrastructure is more than just bricks and mortar. It's the foundation of society. The Persian rulers understood that to govern effectively, they needed to connect their people, protect their resources, and ensure the smooth flow of goods and ideas. Their harsh penalties may seem draconian, but they reveal a deeper truth. The survival of an empire often depends on its ability to adapt, innovate, and maintain order. As we move forward, we'll explore how other civilizations approached the challenges of governance, each offering its own unique perspective on the delicate balance between power and progress. In ancient Sparta, strength wasn't just a virtue, it was a way of life. From the moment a child was born, their fate was tied to the unforgiving demands of a society built entirely around military excellence. One of the most striking examples of this was the law requiring mothers to bathe their newborn sons in wine. To us, this might sound like a bizarre ritual, but for the Spartans, it was a test of survival. If the child endured the harshness of the wine bath, they were considered strong enough to live. If not, they were left to perish. This wasn't cruelty for its own sake. It was a reflection of a society that believed only the strongest deserved a place in its ranks. But the trials didn't end there. As boys grew older, they were thrust into the agoge, a brutal system of military training that began at the age of 7. Separated from their families, they were taught to endure hunger, pain, and extreme physical challenges. The goal wasn't just to create soldiers, it was to forge an unbreakable spirit. Stealing food was encouraged not as a crime but as a lesson in resourcefulness. However, getting caught meant severe punishment, not for the theft itself, but for the failure to execute it skillfully. This harsh upbringing was designed to weed out weakness and instill a mindset where survival and victory were the only acceptable outcomes. The consequences of such a rigid system were profound. On one hand, it produced some of the most feared warriors in history, men who could withstand unimaginable hardships and fight with unmatched discipline. The Spartan army became legendary, their reputation for bravery and skill echoing through the ages. But this came at a cost. The relentless focus on militarism left little room for art, philosophy, or even basic personal freedoms. While other Greek city-states like Athens flourished culturally, Sparta remained singularly focused on war, sacrificing much of what we might consider a balanced society. Yet the Spartans didn't see this as a loss to them. Their way of life was a necessity. Living in a region surrounded by potential enemies, they believed that only through constant vigilance and unyielding strength could they survive. Their laws weren't just about creating soldiers, they were about creating a society where every individual understood their role in the collective defense. The agoge wasn't just training, it was a rite of passage, a way to ensure that every Spartan citizen was prepared to die for their city if necessary. What can we learn from this extreme approach to governance? On one level, it's a reminder of how societies adapt to their circumstances, shaping their laws and values to meet the challenges they face. But it also raises questions about the price of such adaptation. The Spartan system was undeniably effective in creating a powerful military force, but it came at the expense of individuality, creativity, and personal freedom. It's a stark example of how a society's priorities can shape every aspect of life, for better or worse. As we reflect on the legacy of Spartan law, it's impossible not to wonder, could such a system exist today? And if it did, what would we be willing to sacrifice for the sake of strength and security? The Spartans may have lived thousands of years ago, but their story continues to challenge us, forcing us to confront the delicate balance between order and freedom, between strength and humanity. And as we move forward, we'll see how other civilizations answered these questions in their own unique ways. In ancient China, family wasn't just a personal matter, it was the foundation of the entire social order. At the heart of this system was the concept of filial piety, a deeply ingrained belief that children owed their parents unwavering respect, care, and loyalty. This wasn't merely a cultural ideal, it was a legal requirement. One of the most striking laws of the time mandated that children who neglected or mistreated their elderly parents could face severe consequences, ranging from public humiliation to outright exile. Imagine the weight of that expectation. Your duty to your family wasn't just a moral obligation, it was a matter of law. This legal emphasis on filial piety was rooted in Confucian philosophy, which viewed the family as the cornerstone of a stable and harmonious society. Confucius taught that when individuals fulfilled their roles within the family, children respecting parents, parents nurturing children, the entire community would thrive. The law wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing, it was about reinforcing these values, ensuring that each generation understood their responsibilities. In a world without social safety nets, the care of the elderly fell entirely on their families, making these laws both practical and deeply symbolic. But here's where things get complicated. While these laws aim to promote harmony, they also placed immense pressure on individuals, particularly younger generations. For many, the expectation to prioritize family above all else could feel stifling, leaving little room for personal ambition or independence. What happened if a child wanted to pursue a career far from home, or if they simply couldn't afford to care for their aging parents? The law didn't account for these nuances, creating a system that, while well-intentioned, could also be rigid and unforgiving. Yet, the influence of these laws extended far beyond individual families. They shaped Chinese culture in profound ways, embedding values like respect, loyalty, and interdependence into the fabric of society. Even today, the legacy of filial piety can be seen in modern Chinese attitudes toward family and aging. It's a testament to how deeply legal systems can influence cultural norms, leaving a lasting imprint that spans centuries. What can we learn from this ancient approach to family and law? On one hand, it highlights the importance of care and respect within families, values that remain relevant in any era. On the other, it forces us to consider the tension between individual freedom and societal expectations. How do we balance personal ambition with our responsibilities to others? And how can laws support, rather than suppress, the diverse needs of a changing society? These are questions that ancient China grappled with, and ones we continue to wrestle with today. As we step away from the world of filial piety, we'll see how other civilizations approach the challenge of balancing individual and collective needs. Each system offers its own unique perspective, reminding us that the search for harmony is as old as humanity itself. And as we explore these ancient laws, we're not just uncovering the quirks of the past, we're discovering timeless truths about the human experience. In the bustling markets and vibrant temples of the Aztec Empire, one law stood out as both peculiar and revealing: the strict regulation of alcohol. While many ancient cultures enjoyed their share of fermented drinks, the Aztecs approached intoxication with a level of seriousness that might surprise us today. Drinking to excess wasn't just frowned upon, it was a crime. For most people, indulging in alcohol outside of specific religious ceremonies could lead to severe consequences, including public shaming or even execution. But there was one notable exception: the elderly. In Aztec society, older individuals were granted the privilege to drink freely, a practice that speaks volumes about their culture's values and priorities. At first glance, this law might seem contradictory. Why would a society so opposed to drunkenness allow its elders to drink without restriction? The answer lies in the Aztecs' deep respect for age and wisdom. In their view, the elderly had already proven their self-discipline and contribution to society over a lifetime. They were seen as deserving of this privilege, a reward for their years of service and a recognition of their role as keepers of tradition and knowledge. For younger individuals, however, alcohol was off limits, reflecting the Aztecs' belief in moderation as a cornerstone of personal and social stability. This distinction wasn't just about age, it was about maintaining order in a society that prized balance and self-control. The Aztecs believed that excessive drinking could lead to chaos, weakening both the individual and the community. By restricting alcohol consumption, they aimed to protect their social fabric from the disruptions that intoxication might bring. Yet, this law also reveals the rigid hierarchies of Aztec life. The elderly weren't just exempt from these restrictions, they were celebrated, their freedom to drink symbolizing their elevated status. Meanwhile, the young and able-bodied were held to stricter standards, expected to contribute to society without distraction or indulgence. But what about those who broke the rules? The penalties for drunkenness were harsh, designed to serve as a deterrent. Public humiliation, such as having one's head shaved or being forced to clean public spaces, was a common punishment. Repeat offenders could face even graver consequences, including death. These punishments weren't just about enforcing the law, they were about reinforcing the values of discipline and responsibility that the Aztecs held dear. This law offers a fascinating glimpse into Aztec culture, where even something as seemingly mundane as drinking was deeply tied to broader social and spiritual beliefs. It reminds us that laws aren't just about control, they're about expressing a society's ideals and addressing its fears. The Aztecs' approach to alcohol wasn't just about preventing drunkenness, it was about nurturing a culture of respect, balance, and order. As we move forward, we'll explore more laws that reveal the intricate ways ancient societies sought to balance individual behavior with collective well-being. Each one tells a story not just of rules and punishments, but of the values and challenges that shaped these civilizations. And as we uncover these stories, we'll see how the echoes of the past continue to resonate in the ways we think about law, order, and human nature today. Among the rugged fjords and windswept shores of the Viking world, justice wasn't handed down by kings or written in stone. It was forged in the open air through a system as unique as the people who upheld it. The Vikings called it the Thing, a public assembly where disputes were settled, laws were made, and the fate of individuals was decided. Imagine a scene straight out of a saga. A gathering of warriors, farmers, and chieftains standing together under the open sky to debate, accuse, and defend. At the heart of this system was a peculiar law that might seem strange to us today. If a man was accused of a crime, he could clear his name by swearing an oath on a sacred object, a weapon, a ring, or even a relic tied to the gods. To the Vikings, this wasn't just a legal loophole, it was a matter of honor. The power of the oath lay in its sacredness. In a society where reputation was everything, swearing falsely on a revered object was unthinkable. It wasn't just about avoiding punishment, it was about preserving one's standing in the eyes of the community and the gods. A broken oath could bring shame not only to the individual but to their entire family, tarnishing their name for generations. This system relied heavily on trust, but it also revealed the deep spiritual and cultural bonds that held Viking society together. To them, a man's word was his bond, and the Thing was the stage where that bond was tested. But how reliable was this system? Could someone simply lie and escape punishment? The answer lies in the social pressures of Viking life. In a close-knit community where everyone knew each other's business, dishonesty was hard to conceal. A false oath might clear someone's name in the short term, but the risk of exposure was high, and the consequences devastating. The Thing wasn't just a courtroom, it was a theater of reputation where every decision carried the weight of public opinion. This created a powerful deterrent against deceit, ensuring that the system, while imperfect, worked more often than not. The Thing also served a broader purpose, maintaining stability in a society built on fierce independence. The Vikings were pioneers, explorers, and warriors, but they were also farmers and traders who needed order to thrive. The Thing provided a space where conflicts could be resolved peacefully, preventing feuds from spiraling out of control. It was a place where laws were debated and adapted, reflecting the evolving needs of the community. In this way, the Thing wasn't just a legal institution, it was a cornerstone of Viking democracy, a system that valued collective decision-making long before the concept became widespread. What can we learn from this ancient approach to justice? On one hand, it shows us the power of honor and community in shaping behavior. On the other, it raises questions about how we balance trust and accountability in our own systems. The Viking law of the thing reminds us that justice isn't just about rules and punishments, it's about the values that hold a society together. As we leave the world of the Vikings behind, we'll see how other civilizations tackled the challenge of maintaining order, each offering its own unique perspective on the delicate balance between law and humanity. In the dense jungles of Mesoamerica, the ancient Maya built a civilization steeped in mystery and grandeur. Their towering pyramids, intricate calendars, and advanced understanding of astronomy stand as testaments to their ingenuity. But among their many achievements lies a practice that might seem shocking to modern sensibilities: the law of human sacrifice. For the Maya, this wasn't merely a barbaric ritual, it was a sacred duty, deeply intertwined with both their spiritual beliefs and their legal system. In certain circumstances, particularly involving prisoners of war, sacrifice wasn't just allowed, it was required by law. The logic behind this law was rooted in the Maya's worldview. They believed that the gods sustained the world through a delicate balance, and that balance had to be maintained through offerings. Blood, seen as the life force, was the ultimate gift. By offering the lives of captives, the Maya sought to appease the gods and ensure the continued prosperity of their people. This wasn't an act of cruelty for its own sake. It was a profound expression of their commitment to the divine order. To them, sacrifice was as much about survival as it was about faith. Yet, this practice also reveals the complexities of Mayan society. While the law of sacrifice was deeply spiritual, it also served a political purpose. Capturing prisoners for sacrifice was a way for rulers to demonstrate their power and legitimacy. A victorious leader who brought back captives for the gods was seen as favored by the divine, strengthening their authority and uniting their people under a shared sense of purpose. In this way, the law of sacrifice wasn't just about religion. It was about maintaining social cohesion and reinforcing the hierarchy of power. But what does this tell us about the role of religion in shaping laws? For the Maya, the line between the spiritual and the legal was often blurred. Their laws weren't just rules to govern behavior, they were expressions of their deepest beliefs. This connection between faith and governance raises questions that still resonate today. How much should religion influence the law, and how do societies balance spiritual convictions with the need for fairness and justice? The Mayan law of sacrifice also forces us to confront the darker side of human history. While it's easy to judge the past through a modern lens, understanding these laws requires us to see them in the context of their time. For the Maya, sacrifice was a necessary act of devotion, a way to ensure the survival of their world. It's a reminder that what we consider moral or just can vary dramatically across cultures and eras. As we move forward, we'll explore how other civilizations grappled with the interplay of religion and law, each offering its own unique perspective on the delicate balance between faith and governance. These ancient systems may seem strange to us, but they reveal timeless truth about the ways societies seek to make sense of the world and their place within it. The ancient Indian caste system wasn't just a social structure, it was a legal framework that governed every facet of life. Codified into law, this system divided society into rigid hierarchies, with each caste assigned specific roles, responsibilities, and restrictions. One of the most striking laws of the time dictated that members of lower castes could face severe punishment for something as simple as touching, or even looking at a person of a higher caste. To modern sensibilities, this might seem unimaginable, but in ancient India, it was a reflection of a deeply ingrained belief in purity, hierarchy, and divine order. At its core, the caste system was rooted in the concept of dharma or duty. Each caste, whether Brahmins, the priestly class, Kshatriyas, the warriors, Vaishyas, the merchants, or Shudras, the laborers, had a specific role to play in maintaining the balance of society. This wasn't just about social order, it was about cosmic order, a way to ensure that the world functioned as the gods intended. The laws governing caste interactions weren't merely rules, they were seen as sacred obligations designed to preserve harmony and prevent impurity. Yet, these laws also reveal the darker side of this system. The harsh penalties for crossing caste boundaries weren't just about maintaining order, they were about enforcing inequality. For those at the bottom of the hierarchy, life was marked by exclusion and oppression. They were denied access to education, wealth, and even basic dignity, trapped in a system that offered little hope of upward mobility. This rigid structure wasn't just a product of social norms, it was reinforced by law, making it nearly impossible to challenge or escape. But how did such a system persist for so long? Part of the answer lies in its spiritual justification. The caste system was deeply tied to Hindu beliefs about karma and reincarnation. According to this worldview, a person's caste was determined by their actions in past lives, and accepting one's position in the hierarchy was seen as a step toward spiritual progress. This belief made the system not only a social reality but also a moral imperative, shaping how people saw themselves and their place in the world. Over time, the caste system evolved, adapting to new political and cultural realities. Yet, its legacy remains deeply embedded in Indian society, even as modern laws strive to address its injustices. The ancient laws that once upheld this system now serve as a stark reminder of how deeply inequality can be woven into the fabric of a civilization. They challenge us to consider the ways in which laws can both reflect and reinforce societal values for better or worse. What can we learn from this ancient legal framework? On one hand, it shows us how laws can shape culture, embedding certain beliefs and practices into the very structure of society. On the other, it forces us to confront the consequences of such systems, particularly for those who are marginalized or oppressed. The caste system may belong to the past, but the questions it raises about justice, equality, and human dignity are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. As we move forward, we'll explore how other civilizations grappled with these same challenges, each offering its own unique perspective on the delicate balance between law and morality. In ancient Athens, democracy wasn't just a system of governance, it was a bold experiment in collective decision-making. Yet, even in this cradle of democracy, there was a peculiar law that might seem counterintuitive to modern ears: the practice of ostracism. Every year, the citizens of Athens could vote to exile one prominent individual from the city for 10 years. No trial, no charges, just a simple majority vote on a piece of pottery called an ostracon. On its surface, this law was designed to protect the democracy from the threat of tyranny. But beneath that noble goal lay a system fraught with complexity and controversy. The process of ostracism was both straightforward and extraordinary. During a special assembly, citizens would scratch the name of the person they wanted to exile onto a shard of pottery. If at least 6,000 votes were cast and one name received a majority, that person would be banished from Athens for a decade. They weren't stripped of their property or citizenship, just removed from the political arena. The idea was to neutralize potential threats to democracy before they could gain too much power. In a society still haunted by the memory of tyrants, this was seen as a necessary safeguard. But ostracism wasn't just about preventing tyranny, it was also a reflection of Athenian values. In a society where every citizen had a voice, the ability to collectively remove a figure who threatened the balance of power was seen as a triumph of the people's will. It was democracy in action, a way for the community to protect itself from internal threats. Yet, this system also reveals the darker side of democracy, the potential for misuse. Without clear rules about who could be ostracized or why, the process could easily become a tool for silencing dissent or settling personal scores. Take, for example, the case of Themistocles, the brilliant general who led Athens to victory against the Persians at the Battle of Salamis. Despite his contributions, he was eventually ostracized, likely due to political rivalries and personal grudges. His exile serves as a stark reminder of how easily a system designed to protect democracy could be turned against its own heroes. This raises a profound question. Can a law meant to safeguard freedom also become a weapon against it? The practice of ostracism also highlights the challenges of balancing power in a democracy. On one hand, it gave ordinary citizens a way to hold their leaders accountable, ensuring that no single individual could dominate the political landscape. On the other, it created an environment where even the most accomplished figures lived in fear of public opinion. This tension between collective power and individual rights is one that democracies continue to grapple with today. How do we protect the system without stifling the voices of those who challenge it? And how do we ensure that laws designed to prevent abuse aren't themselves abused? What's fascinating about ostracism is how it reflects the broader struggles of democracy, an experiment that, even in its earliest days, was far from perfect. The Athenians were pioneers, exploring ideas about governance that would shape the world for centuries to come. But they were also human, wrestling with the same questions of fairness, power, and accountability that we still face today. As we reflect on this ancient practice, we're reminded that democracy isn't just a system, it's a work in progress, constantly evolving as we learn from the successes and failures of the past. As we move forward, we'll see how other civilizations approach the challenge of governance, each offering its own unique perspective on the delicate balance between order and freedom. These ancient laws may belong to a distant past, but the questions they raise about power, justice, and human nature are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. In ancient Egypt, the line between the natural and the divine was often blurred, especially when it came to animals. Cats, crocodiles, ibises, and even scarab beetles weren't just creatures of the earth, they were living embodiments of the gods. To harm one of these sacred animals wasn't just a crime, it was an act of sacrilege punishable by death. This law might seem extreme to us today, but for the Egyptians, it was a reflection of their profound connection to the natural world and the spiritual forces they believed governed it. The reverence for animals wasn't arbitrary. Each species was associated with a specific deity. Cats, for example, were linked to the goddess Bastet, a protector of the home and a symbol of fertility. Crocodiles were tied to Sobek, the god of strength and power, while ibises were seen as representations of Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. To harm these creatures was to offend the gods themselves, risking divine retribution. This belief shaped not only their laws but also their daily lives. Egyptians often kept cats in their homes, not just as pets but as guardians against evil spirits. Crocodiles, though dangerous, were honored in temples dedicated to Sobek, where they were fed and cared for as living idols. But what happens when religion and law collide in such a deeply intertwined way? For the Egyptians, this intersection created a unique system where spiritual beliefs directly influenced legal consequences. A person who accidentally killed a cat, for instance, might face the same penalty as someone who did so intentionally. The law didn't distinguish between malice and misfortune. It was about preserving the sacred balance of the universe. This rigidity might seem harsh, but it underscores how deeply the Egyptians believed in the interconnectedness of all things. This reverence for animals also had practical implications. The Nile, Egypt's lifeline, teemed with crocodiles, and yet harming them was forbidden. This created a delicate balance between survival and spirituality. How did the Egyptians navigate this? By building temples and rituals around these creatures, they found ways to coexist with the natural world without violating their religious principles. It's a testament to their ingenuity and their ability to harmonize the practical with the sacred. What can we learn from this ancient approach to animals and the law? On one hand, it's a reminder of how deeply cultural beliefs can shape a society's values and practices. On the other, it challenges us to think about our own relationship with the natural world. The Egyptians saw animals not just as resources but as partners in the cosmic order. Their laws weren't just about protecting creatures, they were about maintaining a balance between humanity and the divine. As we move forward, we'll explore more laws that reveal the spiritual side of ancient civilizations, each offering its own unique perspective on the delicate interplay between faith, law, and the natural world. These ancient systems may seem strange to us, but they remind us of the timeless ways societies have sought to make sense of their place in the universe. In ancient Rome, the Vestal virgins held a position unlike any other. These priestesses, chosen as young girls, were entrusted with a sacred duty to tend the eternal flame of Vesta, goddess of the hearth. This flame wasn't just a symbol of warmth and home. It was a living connection to the divine, believed to safeguard the very survival of Rome itself. To ensure this sacred task, the Vestal virgins were required to take a vow of chastity, dedicating their lives entirely to the goddess. But this honor came with a chilling price. If a Vestal virgin broke her vow, the punishment was as severe as it was symbolic. She could be buried alive. This law might seem shockingly harsh to us today, but to the Romans, it was a matter of existential importance. The Vestal virgins weren't just religious figures, they were the spiritual guardians of the state. Their purity was seen as inextricably linked to the well-being of Rome. If a Vestal broke her vow, it wasn't just a personal failing, it was a cosmic disruption, a betrayal of the gods that could bring disaster upon the entire city. The punishment of burial alive wasn't merely a death sentence, it was a ritual act designed to restore the balance that had been violated. Yet, this law also reveals the complexities of Roman attitudes toward women. On one hand, the Vestal virgins held unparalleled power and prestige. They were among the few women in Rome who could own property, vote, and influence political decisions. Their role was so revered that even the highest officials would step aside to let them pass. But on the other hand, their lives were defined by rigid constraints. Their chastity wasn't just a personal choice, it was a legal obligation, enforced by the most extreme penalties. This duality reflects the broader tension in Roman society, where women could hold significant influence but were also subject to strict control. What's particularly striking about this law is how it intertwines spirituality and politics. The Vestal virgins weren't just religious figures, they were political symbols embodying the stability and continuity of Rome. Their fidelity to their vows was seen as a reflection of Rome's fidelity to its gods. In this way, the law wasn't just about punishing individuals, it was about protecting the collective. The severe consequences for breaking the vow served as a constant reminder of the stakes involved, reinforcing the idea that the survival of Rome depended on the purity of its sacred institutions. But how did this system shape Roman culture? The Vestal virgins became enduring symbols of devotion and discipline, their lives held up as examples of the sacrifices required for the greater good. Their role also highlights the deep connection between religion and governance in ancient Rome, where the spiritual and the political were often inseparable. At the same time, their story forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about power, gender, and the price of privilege. Were the Vestal virgins honored or imprisoned by their role? The answer, perhaps, lies somewhere in between. As we leave the world of the Vestal virgins behind, we're reminded of the ways in which laws can reflect a society's deepest beliefs and its most profound contradictions. The Romans may have lived thousands of years ago, but their laws continue to challenge us, forcing us to think about the balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility. And as we move forward, we'll explore how other civilizations navigated these same questions, each offering its own unique perspective on the delicate interplay between law, culture, and human nature. In ancient Babylon, the line between freedom and servitude could be perilously thin, especially when it came to debt. Under the Code of Hammurabi, one of the most striking laws allowed creditors to force debtors into slavery if they were unable to repay what they owed. This wasn't just a matter of personal misfortune. It was a legal mechanism that shaped the lives of countless individuals, reflecting both the economic pressures of the time and the stark realities of survival in an ancient world. At its core, this law was rooted in practicality. In a society without modern banking systems or social safety nets, debt was a constant threat. Farmers borrowing seeds for planting, merchants financing trade expeditions, or families struggling through a bad harvest, anyone could find themselves unable to repay what they owed. The law of debt slavery provided creditors with a way to recover their losses, but it also offered debtors a path to clear their obligations, even if it came at a steep personal cost. For many, this meant years or even a lifetime of labor, often under grueling conditions. Yet the law wasn't entirely devoid of humanity. The Code of Hammurabi included provisions to limit the duration of debt slavery. For instance, a debtor could only be held for a maximum of 3 years, after which they were to be released, their debts considered fully paid. This suggests that while the system was harsh, it wasn't entirely without mercy. The goal was to restore balance, both economic and social, rather than to perpetuate endless suffering. Still, for those caught in its grip, the experience was undoubtedly traumatic, a stark reminder of how deeply financial instability could impact every aspect of life. But what does this law reveal about Babylonian society? On one level, it highlights the interconnectedness of economics and law in the ancient world. Debt wasn't just a personal issue, it was a societal one with the potential to disrupt entire communities if left unchecked. By formalizing the practice of debt slavery, the Babylonians sought to create a system where obligations could be met and order preserved, even if it came at the expense of individual freedom. This tension between collective stability and personal liberty is one that echoes through history, raising questions about how societies balance the needs of the many with the rights of the few. This law also sheds light on the lives of ordinary people, offering a glimpse into the struggles and vulnerabilities of those who didn't leave behind grand monuments or epic tales. For many, debt slavery wasn't just a legal possibility, it was a constant fear, a shadow hanging over their daily lives. It's a sobering reminder of how economic systems can shape human destinies, often in ways that are invisible to those in power. What can we learn from this ancient approach to debt and labor? On one hand, it's a testament to the ingenuity of early legal systems, which sought to address complex problems with the tools they had. On the other, it forces us to confront the human cost of such solutions, reminding us that laws are never just about rules, they're about people. As we reflect on the Babylonian law of debt slavery, we're reminded of the enduring challenges of economic inequality and the ways in which societies have sought, and sometimes failed, to navigate them. This system may belong to a distant past, but the questions it raises about fairness, responsibility, and the limits of power are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. As we move forward, we'll explore how other civilizations approach the challenges of economics and labor, each offering its own unique perspective on the delicate balance between survival and justice. The ancient Celts, with their vibrant culture and fierce independence, were known not just for their warrior spirit, but also for a legal system that stood apart from many of its contemporaries. Known as Brehon Law, this system was rooted in principles of fairness and restitution, rather than vengeance or retribution. Unlike the harsh penalties of Draco's Athens or the rigid hierarchies of the Indian caste system, Brehon Law took a strikingly different approach to justice. If someone caused harm, whether through theft, injury, or even murder, the focus wasn't on punishing the offender but on restoring balance to the community. This was achieved through a system of fines known as arraic, which were carefully calculated based on the severity of the offense and the status of the individuals involved. At the heart of Brehon Law was the idea that every wrong could be righted through compensation. For instance, if someone injured another person, they would pay a fine proportional to the injury. A broken arm might cost more than a bruised shoulder. Even in cases of murder, the family of the deceased could demand a payment rather than seeking revenge. This emphasis on restitution over punishment wasn't just about avoiding bloodshed, it was about maintaining harmony within the community. By resolving conflicts through compensation, the Celts sought to prevent cycles of violence that could tear their society apart. It's a concept that feels remarkably modern, echoing contemporary ideas about restorative justice. But how effective was this system? On one hand, it promoted peace and stability, encouraging people to resolve disputes without resorting to violence. By requiring offenders to pay for their actions, it also held them accountable in a tangible way. Yet, this approach wasn't without its challenges. For one, the fines were often steep, and not everyone could afford to pay them. In such cases, the offender's family or clan might step in to cover the cost, but this created a web of financial obligations that could strain relationships over time. Additionally, the system relied heavily on the honesty and integrity of the Brehons, the judges who interpreted and enforced the law. Without their impartiality, the system could easily be manipulated by the wealthy or powerful. What's fascinating about Brehon Law is how deeply it reflected Celtic values. The Celts placed a high premium on community and mutual responsibility. Their legal system wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing, it was about preserving the bonds that held their society together. This focus on collective well-being is evident in other aspects of Celtic life, from their communal land ownership to their intricate kinship networks. Brehon Law wasn't just a set of rules, it was an expression of their worldview, a way to navigate the complexities of human relationships in a manner that prioritized harmony over conflict. Yet, this system also raises intriguing questions about justice and fairness. Could a system based on fines truly deter crime? Did it favor the wealthy who could afford to pay their way out of trouble? These are questions that echo in modern debates about legal systems and their effectiveness. The Celts may not have had all the answers, but their approach offers a compelling alternative to the punitive models that dominated much of the ancient world. As we explore these ancient laws, it's impossible not to see the parallels to our own time. Brehon Law reminds us that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about finding ways to heal the wounds caused by wrongdoing. It challenges us to think about how we balance accountability with compassion, and how we can create systems that not only enforce rules but also strengthen the fabric of our communities. The Celts may have lived thousands of years ago, but their legal legacy continues to inspire, offering a glimpse into a world where justice was as much about restitution as it was about retribution. Now, let's turn our attention to another civilization and uncover how their laws reveal the values and challenges of their time. Each system tells a story, not just of rules and punishments, but of the people who crafted them and the societies they sought to protect. In feudal Japan, honor wasn't just a virtue, it was the very essence of a samurai's existence. Woven into the fabric of their culture was a law that might seem unthinkable to us today, the practice of seppuku, or ritual suicide. Codified into the legal system, seppuku wasn't just a personal choice. It was a formalized act, a way for a disgraced samurai to reclaim their honor in the eyes of society. Imagine the weight of that decision, choosing death over dishonor, not out of despair, but as a final act of loyalty and responsibility. At the heart of this law was the samurai code, known as Bushido, which placed honor above all else. For a samurai, losing face wasn't just a personal failure. It was a stain on their family, their lord, and even their ancestors. Seppuku was seen as a way to cleanse that stain, to demonstrate that the samurai's sense of duty outweighed their fear of death. The ritual itself was highly formalized, often performed in front of witnesses, with the samurai using a short blade to disembowel themselves. It was a gruesome act, but one imbued with profound symbolism, a final, unflinching commitment to the values they held dear. Yet, this law wasn't just about individual honor, it was also a tool for maintaining social order. In a society where loyalty and hierarchy were paramount, seppuku served as a powerful deterrent against betrayal or misconduct. By making the consequences of dishonor so severe, the law reinforced the idea that a samurai's word and actions carried immense weight. It also provided a way to resolve conflicts without resorting to public trials or executions, preserving the dignity of the samurai class even in moments of failure. In this way, seppuku wasn't just a personal act, it was a mechanism for preserving the stability and reputation of the entire samurai caste. But what does this tell us about the concept of honor? For the samurai, honor wasn't just about reputation. It was about living and dying in accordance with a set of principles that defined their identity. This raises profound questions about the price of such a rigid code. Was seppuku a noble sacrifice or a tragic consequence of an unforgiving system? The answer, perhaps, lies in the stories of those who chose it. Some saw it as a final act of defiance, a way to control their fate even in the face of defeat. Others viewed it as a necessary penance, a way to atone for their mistakes and protect their loved ones from shame. The legacy of seppuku extends far beyond the samurai era. It continues to shape Japanese culture, influencing modern ideas about responsibility, loyalty, and the weight of one's actions. While the practice itself has faded, the values it represents, honor, duty, and the willingness to make sacrifices for the greater good remain deeply ingrained. It's a reminder of how deeply laws can reflect a society's values, and how those values can endure long after the laws themselves have changed. As we reflect on this ancient practice, we're forced to confront the complexities of honor and its role in shaping human behavior. The samurai's code may seem extreme to us, but it challenges us to think about the principles we hold sacred and the lengths we might go to uphold them. In a world where the concept of honor can feel increasingly elusive, the story of seppuku offers a stark, thought-provoking perspective on what it means to live and die by one's values. Now, let's journey to another corner of the ancient world, where laws reveal the intricate ways societies sought to balance power, justice, and survival. Each system tells a story, not just of rules and punishments, but of the people who crafted them and the ideals they sought to protect. High in the Andes Mountains, the Inca Empire thrived as a marvel of organization and unity, its sprawling cities and terraced farms connected by a vast network of roads and bridges. But what held this empire together wasn't just stone and mortar. It was a unique legal system that placed collective responsibility at its core. Known as Mita, this law required every able-bodied citizen to contribute a portion of their labor to public works projects, from building roads and temples to maintaining irrigation systems. While this might sound like a heavy burden for the Incas, it was a way of life, a system that balanced individual effort with the greater good of the community. At first glance, Mita might seem like a form of forced labor, but in practice it was far more nuanced. The Incas viewed work not as a chore, but as a sacred duty, a way to honor the gods and sustain the empire. Each person's contribution was carefully calculated based on their abilities and circumstances, ensuring that the system was fair and equitable. For instance, a farmer might spend part of the year working on a temple, while a craftsman might lend their skills to constructing a bridge. This rotation of labor allowed the empire to accomplish incredible feats of engineering and infrastructure without overburdening any single individual. It was a system built on reciprocity. The labor you gave to the community would, in turn, benefit you and your family. But how did this law shape Inca society? On one level, it fostered a profound sense of unity and shared purpose. The Incas believed that every citizen had a role to play in the success of the empire, and Mita reinforced that belief. It wasn't just about building roads or temples, it was about building a collective identity, a sense of belonging to something greater than oneself. This emphasis on mutual responsibility helped the Incas create one of the most cohesive and resilient societies of the ancient world, capable of sustaining millions across a vast and diverse landscape. Yet, this system also raises important questions about the balance between individual rights and societal needs. While Mita was designed to be fair, it wasn't without its challenges. For some, the demands of public labor could disrupt their personal lives, making it difficult to tend to their own farms or families. And while the Incas took great care to ensure that the system was equitable, there's no doubt that it placed significant pressure on individuals to prioritize the needs of the community over their own. This tension between collective duty and personal freedom is one that societies continue to grapple with today. How do we balance the greater good with the rights of the individual? And what does it mean to live in a society where everyone is expected to contribute? The legacy of Mita offers a fascinating lens through which to explore these questions. On one hand, it demonstrates the power of collective action, showing what can be achieved when a society works together toward a common goal. The roads and temples built under this system weren't just feats of engineering, they were symbols of a society that valued cooperation and mutual support. On the other hand, it reminds us of the sacrifices that such systems can demand and the importance of ensuring that they remain fair and sustainable. What can we learn from the Inca law of Mita? Perhaps it's a reminder that no society can thrive without a sense of shared responsibility, but it also challenges us to think critically about how we define and enforce that responsibility. The Incas may have lived in a very different world, but the questions their laws raise are timeless questions about fairness, community, and the delicate balance between individual and collective needs. As we reflect on their system, we're reminded that the laws we create are more than just rules. They're reflections of the values we hold dear. Now, let's turn to our final segment, where we'll uncover one last law that reveals the ingenuity and complexity of the ancient world. Each of these systems, no matter how strange or severe, offers a glimpse into the ways humanity has sought to navigate the challenges of survival, order, and justice. And as we explore them, we're reminded that the past is never as distant as it seems. In ancient Sumer, marriage wasn't just a personal union, it was a carefully regulated institution, bound by laws designed to maintain social order and family stability. At the heart of these laws was the concept of the bride price, a payment made by the groom's family to the bride's family. This wasn't merely a transaction, it was a symbol of commitment, a way to formalize the bond between two families and ensure the bride's welfare in her new household. But the Sumerians didn't stop there. They also implemented a peculiar law that protected women in the event of divorce. If a man chose to end the marriage without just cause, he was required to return his wife's dowry and pay a fine. This wasn't just about fairness, it was about accountability, ensuring that marriage was taken seriously and that women weren't left vulnerable. The bride price and dowry system reveal a lot about Sumerian values. For one, it highlights the importance of family alliances in a society where survival often depended on strong social networks. Marriage wasn't just about love, it was about creating ties between families, pooling resources, and ensuring mutual support. The bride price, in particular, served as a form of insurance for the bride's family, compensating them for the loss of her labor and contributions to the household. At the same time, the dowry, usually consisting of goods, livestock, or land, provided the bride with a measure of financial security, giving her some independence in her new life. These practices show how deeply economic and social considerations were intertwined in Sumerian marriage laws. But what about the law protecting women in divorce? This aspect of Sumerian law is particularly fascinating because it challenges some common assumptions about gender roles in ancient societies. While women in Sumer didn't enjoy the same freedoms as men, this law suggests that they weren't entirely powerless either. By requiring a man to return the dowry and pay a fine if he divorced his wife without cause, the law provided women with a degree of protection against arbitrary decisions. It also reflects the Sumerians' belief in the sanctity of marriage, treating it as a binding contract that couldn't be dissolved lightly. This emphasis on stability and accountability is a recurring theme in Sumerian law, underscoring their commitment to maintaining harmony within families and communities. Yet, these laws also raise important questions about the balance of power in Sumerian marriages. While the bride price and dowry system offered some protections, it also reinforced the idea of women as economic assets, valued primarily for their contributions to the household. The law may have provided a safety net in cases of divorce, but it didn't necessarily challenge the broader inequalities that shaped women's lives. This tension between protection and control is a recurring theme in the history of marriage, reminding us that legal systems often reflect the values and priorities of their time, even as they strive to address the challenges of human relationships. What can we learn from the Sumerian approach to marriage? On one hand, it's a testament to the ingenuity of early legal systems, which sought to navigate the complexities of family life with a mix of pragmatism and idealism. The emphasis on stability and accountability resonates even today, as societies continue to grapple with questions about the meaning and purpose of marriage. On the other hand, it's a reminder of how deeply cultural beliefs can shape laws, and how those laws, in turn, shape people's lives. The Sumerians may have lived thousands of years ago, but their laws continue to offer insights into the enduring challenges of love, family, and social responsibility. As we reflect on these ancient laws, we're reminded that the history of marriage is as much about the evolution of ideas as it is about the lives of individuals. Each society has its own way of defining and regulating this most intimate of relationships, shaped by its unique values, challenges, and aspirations. The Sumerians may have approached marriage with a focus on stability and accountability, but their laws also reveal the complexities of human connection, a theme that remains as relevant today as it was in the ancient world. And with that, we've reached the end of our journey through the peculiar laws of the ancient world. But don't go just yet, stay tuned as we wrap up with a final reflection on what these laws can teach us about the timeless struggles and triumphs of humanity. In the rugged, windswept lands of the Norse world, where honor was as vital as breath and loyalty was the cornerstone of survival, blood feuds were more than just personal vendettas, they were a way of life. Yet, even in this fierce and often unforgiving society, the law played a crucial role in maintaining order. When a man killed another, the consequences weren't left to chance or chaos. Instead, the Norse legal system offered a structured, albeit grim, solution: the payment of Wehrgild or blood money. This wasn't just a fine, it was a carefully calculated sum determined by the status of the victim and intended to compensate their family for their loss. By accepting the Wehrgild, the victim's family could agree to end the feud, preventing an endless cycle of retaliation and bloodshed. At its core, this system was rooted in the Norse values of honor and restitution. Paying Wehrgild wasn't just about avoiding punishment, it was about acknowledging the wrong and making amends. For the killer, it was a way to restore their standing in the community, proving they were willing to take responsibility for their actions. For the victim's family, it offered a tangible form of justice, a way to grieve without resorting to further violence. In a society where personal honor was everything, this legal mechanism provided a path to resolution that balanced justice with pragmatism. But how effective was this system in maintaining peace? On one hand, it succeeded in curbing some of the most destructive aspects of blood feuds, offering a way to resolve disputes without tearing communities apart. By formalizing the process of restitution, the law gave families a way to move forward, even in the face of tragedy. Yet, this system wasn't without its flaws. The amount of Wehrgild often depended on the social standing of the victim, meaning that the life of a chieftain was valued far more than that of a common farmer. This inequality could lead to resentment, especially if the payment was seen as insufficient or unfair. Additionally, not all families were willing to accept Wehrgild. In some cases, the demand for vengeance outweighed the desire for compensation, leading to prolonged feuds that could last for generations. The Law of Wehrgild also reveals the complex interplay between individual honor and communal stability in Norse society. While the system aimed to prevent widespread violence, it also placed a heavy burden on individuals to navigate the delicate balance between personal pride and collective well-being. For a killer, paying Wehrgild might restore their honor, but it could also leave them financially ruined. For the victim's family, accepting payment might bring closure, but it could also feel like a betrayal of their loved one's memory. These tensions highlight the challenges of creating a legal system that addresses both the emotional and practical needs of a community. What can we learn from the Norse approach to blood feuds? On one level, it's a reminder of how deeply cultural values can shape laws, even in the most violent of societies. The emphasis on restitution over retribution reflects a belief in the possibility of reconciliation, even in the face of deep loss. On the other hand, it forces us to confront the limitations of such systems, particularly when it comes to issues of fairness and equality. The Law of Wehrgild may have worked for some, but it left others feeling marginalized or overlooked, a reminder that no system is perfect. As we reflect on this ancient practice, we're reminded of the enduring tension between justice and mercy, between individual rights and communal needs. The Norse may have lived in a very different world, but their laws continue to challenge us, forcing us to think about how we resolve conflicts and what it means to truly seek peace. Now, let's turn to our final section, where we'll explore one last law that reveals the ingenuity and complexity of the ancient world. Each of these systems, no matter how strange or severe, offers a glimpse into the ways humanity has sought to navigate the challenges of survival, order, and justice. And as we explore them, we're reminded that the past is never as distant as it seems. From the rigid justice of Hammurabi's code to the intricate reciprocity of Inca labor laws, these 19 peculiar laws from the ancient world paint a vivid picture of humanity's earliest attempts to create order in a chaotic world. Each law, no matter how strange or severe by today's standards, reflects the values, fears, and aspirations of the societies that crafted them. Whether it was the Babylonians holding builders accountable for their work, the Spartans testing newborns for strength, or the Norse offering blood money to end feuds, these legal systems reveal the universal human drive to balance individual rights with collective well-being. While some of these laws may shock us, like the Aztec prohibition on alcohol or the Mayan rituals of sacrifice, they also challenge us to see the world through the eyes of our ancestors. These weren't arbitrary rules, they were deeply rooted in the cultural, spiritual, and practical realities of their time. The ancient Egyptians revered animals as divine, the Athenians used ostracism to protect their democracy, and the Celts prioritized restitution over retribution. Each system, in its own way, sought to answer the same fundamental questions we grapple with today. How do we maintain fairness? How do we protect the vulnerable? And how do we balance the needs of the individual with the survival of the community? What makes these laws so fascinating isn't just their strangeness, it's what they tell us about ourselves. They remind us that the search for justice and meaning is as old as civilization itself. The ancient world may feel distant, but its echoes resonate in our modern legal systems, from the principles of accountability to the debates over fairness and equality. These laws are more than historical curiosities. They are mirrors reflecting the timeless struggles and triumphs of humanity. So, what can we take away from this journey through the ancient world? Perhaps it's a deeper appreciation for the ingenuity of our ancestors, who crafted systems of justice with the tools and beliefs they had. Or maybe it's a renewed sense of humility, recognizing that the challenges of law and order are as complex today as they were thousands of years ago. Whatever the lesson, one thing is clear: the past is never as distant as it seems. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of history's most peculiar laws. If you enjoyed this journey through the ancient world, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more fascinating dives into the mysteries of our shared past. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring the stories that shaped our